Welcome to the Women of Ambition podcast. I'm your host, Alyssa Calder-Hume. We are going to continue our discussion on ambitious relationships today by looking at divorce and relationships with an ex-spouse. Jessica shares with us her story of friendship as well as co-parenting with her ex-husband and the integration of her current family with her new husband and her ex-husband and what that looks like for them. All the textures of love that she has been able to incorporate into our life by having this kind of next level relationship with her ex-husband and being able to work on her personal healing and her values to create this life that she really loves and do what to a lot of people might be impossible. Hello, everybody. I am here today with Jessica Frew from the Husband-in-Law podcast. Thanks so much for being on, Jessica.
Thanks for having me. I am super excited to chat with you.
I have to tell you, you did a really good job naming your podcast because I'm in the world of podcasters. I see a lot of them, and I saw that title come up somewhere, and I was like, "Whoa, what is that?" And you tell us what your podcast is, if you want to be the one to explain that.
Yeah, so I host my podcast with my husband and my ex-husband. And to add another layer to that, my husband and I are active members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and my ex-husband is gay. So people always find that to be a really interesting dynamic, and it is. But yeah, and the name came from a dream that Steve had, my ex-husband had, when he was introducing my husband in the dream. He was like, how do I introduce him? Because, usually say, well, this is my friend, this is my, coworker, my mother-in-law or whatever. And he was like, so I just was like, well, he's my husband-in-law. So that's been the running joke. So yeah, that I love the name too. I think it's perfect for our relationship and perfect for the podcast.
I love that so much. It's certainly eye-catching and it's so funny. And I've listened to several of your episodes, and just the dynamic between the three of you is so interesting. And so I invited you on today because we're doing this segment on relationships, ambitious relationships, which pretty much is the only type of relationships ambitious women have. We go 1,000% in, and you have maintained a really beautiful relationship with your ex-husband and facilitated a relationship between your current husband and your ex-husband. And so today we're going to look at ambitious relationships with an ex-spouse. And I know this is a sticky topic for so many people. What kind of response do you get when you're like, I voluntarily have a hobby with these two men in my life?
It's pretty interesting. And that's honestly why this became a thing, is because just sharing our story on like a day-to-day basis. I remember talking to people at the gym and being like, oh, well, I don't know, explaining my life to people, and people would just be like, what? Like, what? You're friends with your ex-husband and all of these things. And so, you get mixed responses of why would you keep him in your life? Or also, that's so amazing. And people loved hearing the story and were so interested. And so I think it's something to share of what we've been able to create.
Would you call it friendship? Is that like, how do you categorize it? We don't have a word for that.
Yeah. So honestly, for me, my relationship with Steve, my ex-husband, is deeper than a friendship. And I always say it's almost like he's my brother. Like, I care that deeply about him. And I want to say involved in his life. I'm not really like involved in his life, but on many levels I am. I'm his go-to person, and he's mine on some level. Obviously, my husband is above that, but I care so much about him and what is going on in his life and what he's going through and all of those things, that it really feels like he's more of a brother to me that I share a kid with, which is so weird, but also feels right for us. That's the best way we've been able to explain it to people, is that there's, the relationship has shifted from a romantic, in love type of relationship in any way, shape, or form to this different kind of love that I didn't know was out there.
Yeah, I love that. It's family.
Yeah. Yeah. In every sense of the word, he is a part of my family.
Can you share with us maybe the progression of your relationship? And I'm sure there have been highs and lows, and how you've arrived at this place where you can openly love and call him your brother, your family.
Yeah. So when Steve and I got married, we were young and in love, and we were raised in, very well in the LDS church. So very conservative Christian church. And we, we just did all the steps. We went through the motions of what we were supposed to do, and we wanted to do it. Felt right for us, and we were happy in that. But about 6 months into our marriage, like, I found all this gay porn on our computer, and I was like, whoa, like, is my husband gay? And I asked him that at that point, and he was like, no, I'm not gay. I just felt it was better to look at men instead of women. So I'm not disrespecting women. And he had this whole story that he had created for himself, but he was really just in extreme denial.
Yeah.
And at that time, I had to kind of think for myself, even though he had admitted it, I'm like, I'm pretty sure that he's gay. And so processing that, kind of thinking about that, and we continued forward in our marriage. A couple years into our marriage, he did come out as gay to me and just said, I'm gay, but that's not the lifestyle I want to live. That's not the life I want to live. And at the time, that's how we refer to it, like the lifestyle. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
lifestyle, it's your life. um, but he was like, I'm committed to our marriage, and we stayed married. And so we were married a total of 7 years. Um, and during that time, I think there's been different moments of letting go of the relationship I thought we would have and mourning that relationship. I think that it's a very real process that we skip over, is that there is a mourning process, and that's okay. It's okay to mourn what you thought your life was going to look like, what you thought the relationship was going to look like. And then we heal from that and move forward. And so it was like, when he came out officially to me, there's a mourning process of, okay, this is different than what I had anticipated, but we're staying married. And so there's some things that are still the same. And then he did end up having an affair just before our 7-year wedding anniversary. And again, a huge, another mourning process that you go through. And we were officially divorced by our 7th wedding anniversary. So, and it was so hard to comprehend that here's this man that I still love and that I know loves me. Like, there was never any doubt in my mind that Steve didn't love me. But having to rethink this whole thing of how we show up. And I'd only seen one version of divorce growing up. I didn't
Right.
come from a divorced home. I didn't have that experience, but I had friends and family and people in church that went through that and experienced that. And I had only seen this very negative, angry, hateful side of divorce. And so I really I thought, well, that's not what I want. This is where I'm at. I'm getting a divorce, and really making a conscious effort to decide how I wanted our divorce to look. And Steve and I talked about this on a regular basis, um, of figuring out how our relationship looks now. Like, what do we really want for our daughter, and also for ourselves, because we did love and care about each other. And so we really went through and processed that, and it was this whole evolution of like I always say, it's like you gotta you need to lean into that mourning process and understanding, why am I sad that I'm losing this, and embracing those feelings and processing that, but then also saying, but what can this relationship now give me? Where is the joy in this relationship now? What are parts that I don't want to let go of, that I don't have to? Um, and so I think that's been key for us in focusing on those things that bring us joy in our relationship and being able to connect still. I hear people say, well, I don't want to lose, I don't want my kid to lose that bond between their parents, or like, you know, I feel the moments of pride as a parent,
Mm-hmm.
and being able to connect to your partner, your co-parent in that moment, is something that I'm grateful for, that we've never had to give up. Like, I'll text Steve in the morning sometimes when I drop Penny off at school and be like, our kid is so cute. Like, we just, like those moments that you just feel that. And we often give that up in divorce. And I feel so grateful that we've been able to maintain that we get to have those things. So there's the really long answer to your question.
No, I love it. Thank you. I think all those parts are really important to this story because it hasn't been some easy road, and so you've just had it easy, and that's why you can keep your relationship. You've chosen it through
Yeah.
the hard things.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's definitely up and down. And there are still moments that I want to get angry at him, or that we do not do things, we do not parent in the same way. In some ways we do, in other ways we don't. So it's really, focusing on, does this really matter? Just this
yeah,
thing yeah.
interesting. What gave you the audacity to think that you could have this new type of relationship with an ex-spouse?
um there was a lot of audacity in there. I love that you just called it that. And people were very like, how do you have the audacity to think that you can make this work? And I'm still told that, like, this isn't real. You guys don't really have this type of relationship. Like, that's fine. You can think that, you're not in it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think knowing who I was at my core and understanding what felt right to me gave me that audacity in those moments when friends and family were like, what are you doing? Why are you staying friends with him? How can you be so close to him and so forgiving? Um, but having this understanding of what was really important to me in my life and my relationships is what gave me that confidence to do that. That the clarity of, this is how I want it to look, and I'm going to do that, and I can do that. We are capable of doing this. And yeah, it's going to take some work figuring that out, but we can get there. And so I think really knowing myself and what felt right for me and our relationship is what gave me that confidence to move forward and to not listen to the people along the way who were like, why would you do this? What's
Yeah.
the point? And there is a point. And I see that every day with my daughter, of the peace that she gets in her life because we get along. And that's really what it comes down to.
It's really beautiful. I also am not from a home that experienced divorce, but I've, had a lot of friends whose families went through that, and I've interacted with a lot of women who are divorced. I've seen a lot of really unhealthy separations, and what we call broken families, and
Mm.
and I don't really love that term, but I see broken people resulting from these relationships, and it's heartbreaking. Do people feel threatened by the health of your relationship with your ex-husband?
I think so. I think there are people that just, they can't grasp that because they haven't healed themselves. And
Yeah.
it's when we, embrace that healing ourselves, that then we're like, oh, I can see how this can work and how this is manageable. And I want to make it clear that I understand having both types of co-parenting relationships. With my husband's ex-wife, we have a very different relationship. With Steve, Steve's over here like once a week for dinner and lunch, and he works with my husband. Like, my husband owns his own business, Matt owns his own business, and Steve works for him. And so like, it's literally like we are in each other's lives every day on some level. And with Matt's ex, we also have a very, I mean, boundaried relationship. All relationships are boundaries. Boundaries are
Mhm.
good. It's important,
Yes.
but
Yes,
it's a
absolutely.
different level of boundaries of, we communicate through email as much as possible. And we do pick up and drop off in a public place and all of these things. And honestly, like, that's okay too. I've
Yeah.
come to really realize, like, if you don't have to have this same relationship to do what's best for your kids. Sometimes what's best for your kids is that you have those safeguards in place so that it doesn't lead to the high conflict arguments and things like that can be just as important. That being said, I see the difference in my stepkids and in my daughter, in the confidence in their relationships and the confidence in showing up for themselves, and all of those things. There is, it takes a toll on kids to have to filter out these two sides of themselves, their parents who they love. And so I think people show up in a way, well, I could never have that. And I get that. I understand that some people cannot have the relationship Steve and I have. And that's okay. You can still feel happiness and joy for the people that have that, or be understanding of the different
Mhm.
types of relationships. And you should still feel confident in the way that you are showing up to your relationship with your co-parent. Like, don't dismiss the courage that it takes to set the boundary, the courage that it takes to understand what you need. And Steve and I have been through that process as well, of saying, this situation didn't work for me. Can we try it a different way? Like, there's been lots of conversations like that. And again, when my husband came into the picture, and now that Steve has a significant other as well, it's just an ongoing process of saying, you know what, this used to work. It's not working now. Let's figure out a different way of doing it. Or we just don't do that thing anymore. And that's okay too.
Is your relationship with your ex-husband purely for your daughter, or do you get something out of it as well?
I find huge fulfillment in my relationship with Steve. And I think sometimes I'm like, am I doing this for Penny, or is this just as much for us? And I think it just doesn't matter. And there is, Steve was my best friend for years, and we worked through so much in those, your 20s, of learning about yourself and really understanding what it is you believe and how you want to show up to life. We did that together, and we did it very openly with each other. Um, we knew the things that nobody else knew. And so now to be able to still have him around and a part of my life, um, brings me a lot of joy and happiness and gratitude that I can be there for him. He and I just had a big conversation yesterday of, he's wanting to make some changes in his life and he wants somebody to bounce that off of. And I'm the person that knows him the best right now, and on a level that most people don't. And so I feel privileged that I still get to have that, and very humbled that we've been able to make that work. So I think, it is for our daughter, and it's a beautiful gift that we get to give to her that also helps us and brings us peace and joy as well along the way. And I think that's how most relationships go, is if they're good, healthy relationships, they bless the people around you and that are also involved in that relationship.
I love it. You mentioned that Steve has a significant other now, and that you are an active member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which I am as well. So I can understand some of those levels, but not all of our listeners are. So can you maybe talk about transitioning? I don't know where you came from before being comfortable around, the lifestyle, which,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
people who are queer. And now you have a child who is, I would expect, interacting with Steve's significant other. Can you talk about that? Because that seems like it could be a really challenging situation to navigate and transition within.
Mm-hmm. So since Penny was little, and I feel like even before Steve came out and we got divorced, we had kind of had talks around the fact, at least I always felt, that I wanted her to know who her dad was, whether he was openly gay and we were divorced and whatever, or if he was still in the church and we were still married and all of those things. I wanted her to know who he was, that this was part of who he was, that he's gay and what that means. And um, that it makes absolutely no difference how we love and support him, that he is still an important part of her life. And, all of those things. And so since she was little enough to kind of understand what that meant, we would have basic conversations. And usually from her asking, well, why? Like, she saw Steve kiss one of his boyfriends when she was like 3. She was like, Daddy, boys don't kiss boys. And because it wasn't something she'd been exposed to or seen. And then we realized also we needed to expose her to more of these types of relationships so that it is a normal thing for
Mhm.
her, that she understands that this is a real thing, that people were created this way. And so um, I think that it's just been a conversation we've been willing to have, that we, and I think a lot of people are scared to have it, especially within the church. Well, what if this pushes them to be gay? What if it, like, and I'm like,
You're
who
exposing
cares?
them.
Yes. Yeah. You're exposing them to like something bad. And I do not view it as something negative. And I think that's a hang up people get on, is that, well, it's a bad thing. And it's not. I firmly believe we were created the way we were created, each of us individually, for a reason. And that we are loved and received and all of these things by our heavenly parents. And so it's important to teach our kids that, and to help them see that this is who your parent is. This is who they are. And this is beautiful and wonderful. And yes, we don't live the same way, and that doesn't matter, for us to still love people. And that goes on a whole number of levels of, people do things that, you might not feel are okay. And that's okay. Like, that's how they feel they should live. And that's beautiful and that's wonderful. And I want to take that back like a step and say, I don't believe that people who are queer are living like any sort of thing that I feel is bad, or like I said that, but I feel like people identify that as the same as, oh, well, it's the same as drinking alcohol, or it's the
Mm-hmm.
same as, all these things. I think, especially within the church, we compare them to that. And it's not. This is just innate to their identity of who they
Mm-hmm.
are. And also, who cares if people drink alcohol and do those other things? Like, those are their choices, and it's totally awesome and great. So for us, it's been a way to teach her how to love and how to think of life in a broader, expansive realm. Um, yes, she goes to church with me on Sundays. And then after church, I drop her off to Steve and his partner, and they live together, and it's wonderful. And she gets to experience all these different types of life. And at this point, I'm like, I wouldn't have it any other way. I love this experience that she gets and the exposure that she gets. And I feel like she's going to be one powerful kid, and people are going to feel included. She makes space for that, and she's not afraid to speak up. um and she understands that it's okay if she is afraid to speak up. I always tell her that. I'm like, you can speak up, or you don't have to. Like, you can wait until you're comfortable. Don't ever feel like you have to put yourself in a position where you're not comfortable, but you also have this ability to help others feel seen and loved. And um it's been pretty cool to watch.
So it sounds like you've been pretty open and coming from a place of wholeness and love from the beginning. As a parent, I do. We also live. I know you live in Idaho, correct?
Mm-hmm.
We live in Utah. We live in a very small corner of Utah. It's very conservative. It's very whitewashed. It's all the
Mm-hmm.
things. Um, and I do what I can to expand their experience, expand their compassion, expose them to all different kinds of people and ways of living and belief systems. And I would love to think of myself as being totally okay with anyone's choices and teaching my kids to love unconditionally. But it feels all very hypothetical. And I'm very aware that the second they become teenagers, all of my talk is going to be put to the test, and all
Mm-hmm.
of my, non-judgment and love everybody, and we don't judge people for their choices. Everyone has their own relationship with their heavenly parents, and it's not our place to insert ourselves. Like, I know I'm going to be called on that eventually.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have that moment of like, hypothetically, I want you to always be loving and inclusive to your daughter, and then, oh, now I have to put my money where my mouth is?
I think there's been little moments of that along the way. So far, like, no huge glaring moments. Um, but I mean, it's happened numerous times with my stepkids, more blatantly.
Okay.
And also, but that's, and again, that's still not the same feeling as it is with my daughter, that I know it's going to be with my daughter. But I have come to realize that I know inside of myself that it's there, like, that this desire has grown enough to be able to let her love as she wants to love, and to be inclusive as she wants to be inclusive, and to be herself however that feels right to her, that I know I know it's gonna be okay. Like I think, and as you're saying that, I'm like, you've got that too. I think when there's that genuine desire, it might take us a minute to, like, when something happens, to be like, oh, I wasn't expecting that one, or whatever.
Mhm.
This is what I had envisioned for you, and this isn't what you're doing or how you're living. Um, and I think that it's okay to take that moment of pause to say, whoa, that impacted me more than I realized. That's that's real. And honestly, I think on some level it's okay to vocalize that. Yes, I firmly believe when your kid comes to you in the moment of, hey, I did this, or I believe this, or I feel this, whatever, we we that's engage with them and get curious about it and talk to them in a healthy manner instead of freaking out. And maybe have the freak out by yourself. And I also think it's okay to tell them, you know what, this kind of scared me a little, and here's why. But maybe not in that moment, maybe not in that first initial
Yeah, it's
moment, but
about
taking that
them
time.
in that moment.
Yes,
You can
yes,
have your moment later.
yeah. Yeah, and I think it's okay to let them know you had that moment. I think that's 100% real and honest, and I firmly believe in doing that. um I've just we've talked in our podcast about, like, throwing out the manual of just, throwing out this book of what we thought our life would look like, what we think our
Mhm.
kids' lives should look like. And there are things that I chip away at in my thinking with Penny of how how I think her life should look like. And Steve and I have talked about the fact, for even he has things like this that he's still working on throwing out. Like, and one of them for both of us is the fact that if she ever can't have kids or decides to not have kids, like, that's one that would be really hard for us. But also I'm like, okay, but it would be okay. Like,
Mhm.
it would be totally fine. And understanding that, everything else I've kind of, like, if she stays in the church, great. If she doesn't, great. Like, I just want her to do what feels right for her. And I think when we have that genuine desire, it builds and grows as our children grow. And as you see them exploring and figuring out who they are, there's an excitement around that. And I think if we can keep that excitement and trust them, and they feel that trust from us, they trust themselves, they're going to make good decisions. We're not always going to agree with them, but we did the same thing. We got to learn.
Mhm.
Yeah, we got to give them that space and support them along the way.
There's there's a few people who've talked about this concept of your children need to disappoint you, and they need to they're going to throw away something that's really important to you, but then they're going to keep something.
Mhm.
So they're going to, ditch your religion but keep your values. They're
Yeah.
going to change their political stance, but still, you can still bond over your hobbies, and how that differentiation is an essential part of becoming a well-rounded adult. And I'm
Mhm.
trying so hard to set myself up for that as a parent. And I know it's going to be hard, but I also know this is a part of their healthy development. And I
Mhm.
want them to be secure enough to differentiate from me and make their own choices that I don't agree with. And that is going to be a really hard but really beautiful moment when they can stand on their own feet.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't it Glennon Doyle that talks about that whole, I would rather you disappoint me, like, as a parent, than my
Yes.
child, like, telling her kids, I'd rather you disappoint me than you disappoint yourself. And I
Mhm.
just feel that I'm like, I want my daughter to be true to who she is. Um, Whether I feel disappointed in that or not is on me, not on her.
Yeah, so this goes into the next topic I would really like to discuss. And like, to be a parent, to be in that place, you have to be healthy and secure.
Mhm.
To go through this transition with a ex-husband and still have him in your life, you have to be really healthy and secure. We've talked about throwing away the shoulds and the layers of that, I'm sure, that come as time passes on and you think, this is the way I thought my life was going to go. It's going a different way now. What supports have you had in place to help you during this process? And any recommendations you might give to someone else?
So one of the things you said is, our kids might throw away, like, our religion, but they keep our values. And for me, that's way more important to me, is keeping those values. And I think for us, that's where we have to be is understanding our values. When we know like what the value is in our life, what we really value, it's easier to allow our lives to morph and to see that, oh, there's another way to still keep this value while my life is not what I thought it would be.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, for me in all of this, my value was my daughter's emotional, mental health. But also, I value love. Like, love is my jam in life. And I felt like, okay, if I really value that and believe in that, then what does this really look like moving forward? So, in that, to be able to go through these hard things, to take the time to get to know yourself and to to know yourself right then in that moment, not like it was a year ago or 6 months ago or whatever, not who you were in high school or junior high, but to know what it is right now that is important to you and to dive into that over and over again, especially when you're going through these big life changes. Um, to think, okay, so I need to focus on me and my healing and what I value and want out of this new situation. I can't control this. I'm getting a divorce. Um, what do I really want from that? And that's a weird question to ask yourself when you're going through a divorce because nobody
Mm-hmm.
gets married wanting a divorce. So it's like, what do I want from my divorce? I want to be married. Like I want to stay in this relationship, but go deeper on that. Okay, so I can't have that marriage, but what is important to me for the people involved in this relationship? What is the most important thing? Um, and what are my fears around it? That really helped me identifying my fear of divorce because when I knew I was actually getting divorced, I'm like, okay, so why does divorce freak me out so much? What is it that I'm scared of? And it came down to that fact that I was worried what it looked like for my daughter. I was
Mm-hmm.
okay. I knew I would be okay. I was strong. I was healthy, like, emotionally healthy. Um, but I really worried about how that looked for my daughter. And so identifying that allowed me to say, okay, so what do I want from my daughter? And you work through it from there. There's this circumstance. This is how coaching works. There's a circumstance. What are my thoughts around it? Why do I have these thoughts? And what are they leading me to feel? And so when I could focus on the fact that I wanted what was best for my daughter, I wanted her to have parents that were there in whatever big life events are important to her. I wanted both her parents to be there in the same room without her worrying about us. I wanted her to feel excited that we were both there, that she's not thinking, oh crap, are my parents talking to each other who I need to keep them separate. I need to have, it's always in the movies, like you go talk to this parent, you go talk to that parent and keep them away from each other. I didn't want that for her. And so I think for me, that was huge in knowing my values and what I really valued, and then knowing my fear around the thing so that I could take action to combat that I could feel empowered. Like I could have control of my life, even though my life felt out of control and totally not something I expected. I still felt in control because I took back my own power by knowing what it was I valued and where my fears were and understanding them so I could take action.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned coaching. Is that something that you did during that time?
I didn't. I I guess that's not completely true. I had been in a lot of support groups uh, to help me process and all of those things. And what I found was I ended up doing most of the mentoring within those support groups. I feel like I was just given this gift of it's something that comes naturally to me of understanding myself and listening to myself. And I then, in the thick of all of this craziness that's happening in my life, realized I was very good at helping other women work through these things that they're going through, whether it was the same thing or not. And so I've since dove into, what does coaching actually look like and mentoring other people and helping them through these hard things and how does my brain actually work, because I needed the words behind that of
Mm-hmm.
like I know how my brain works, but why is it doing this, and is this a real thing? And the more I dove into it, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what I've been doing for years by myself, working through it. And I had like journal entries of me asking myself these questions for years, like since I was in high school of going through these questions of, well, what is it I want and what was uncomfortable at the situation? Why did I feel that way? And I've since like put that into a journal, a guided journal that other people can buy, and also provide mentoring groups and programs for people. But it's been cool to be able to see that in myself, but I'm a huge advocate for coaching or for therapy or for utilizing those resources. I have done therapy, like I've gone in and worked through things because sometimes it's too much to work through on your own. I
Mm-hmm.
especially, and honestly, I did therapy when I got remarried because that was the hardest. That was like totally mind blowing to me how hard
Mm-hmm.
it was to be remarried. Um, and so that's when I really like I had a therapist and I was working through all this stuff on my own and realizing all of the things. So um but yeah, so I think that it's important to utilize those resources when you can and when you need them, and even when you don't need them, like check-ins are good no matter what.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I'm wondering, in your experiences coaching other women, are who are your clients? Are they people going through transitions like yours?
Yeah, so right now I am specifically working with women who have had a spouse or partner come out, and whether they are staying in the relationship or they're getting, divorced or separating or whatever, working through that process of what does this look like for me? How do I process this information? And understanding, their fears, their values, and all of those things. So that's who I'm specifically working with right now. Although come this summer, I'm going to open up, I think, two coaching groups for one who are specifically co-parents and working through figuring out your co-parenting relationship, and
Mm-hmm.
also one dealing with being intentional about your faith, of how to understand your faith now after you've been through all of these things and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't feel the same, but also I love my faith. And how do I mesh these two worlds? Um, and I think so many of us are in the thick of that.
Yes, 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 we
Yeah.
are. Yes, we are. Um, I'm so glad you're doing a co-parenting class
Mm.
because I mean, as a child growing up and seeing divorce around me, I heard lots of stories and I saw the effects on my friends. Um, I'm wondering if you have seen trends in co-parenting, or maybe it feels like it's more like a thing now that parents are trying to co-parent, and I see my friends doing this and I'm just like, holy crap, you are so ambitious to want to maintain this level of the relationship. You agreed to be parents, you're still parenting together. And I didn't really see that growing up in my friends. It was they were divorced and they were separate and they would do drop-offs and they had separate clothes and separate backpacks um and I'm wondering if that's generational or is it just my exposure?
So I think there are a few things that come into play here. First of all, I think divorce has gotten way more prevalent, obviously, since probably even when we were kids growing up. Um, and so it's talked about more. And I think
Mm,
that there is more education and resources available for parents to try to understand how to have a healthy co-parenting relationship, no matter how that looks. Like I said, like you can have a healthy co-parenting relationship and only communicate through email and do all those things. Um, it might not be the ideal, but it's still functional and working. And you can also have a healthy co-parenting relationship and do birthdays together and be able to spend the holidays together or whatever that means for you. Um, so I think there's just more people talking about it and more people diving into owning their part. Like, yeah, Steve and I got divorced, but I also owned my part in that. I mean, it's pretty for most people. They're like, "Well, no crap, you got divorced. He's gay." Like, yeah, it's very blatant the reason we got divorced. But also, I had to work through. There was an affair, there was infidelity, and working through, and also accepting responsibility for my part of I chose to stay with a man I knew was gay. I knew he was
yeah.
gay 2 years into our marriage, for sure. Like he openly admitted it, and I chose to stay. I chose to have a daughter with him, knowing that this might be the reality. And so owning our part, I think, has really helped a lot of people, even when there is infidelity, of saying, well, maybe I was at fault in these areas, and not like shaming ourselves for that or beating ourselves up for that, but just acknowledging that goes a
Yeah.
long ways for both parents. And so I think there's a lot of things that come together. Is first, there's a lot more divorce. Second, people are talking about it, of ways to make co-parenting relationships better, and that there are other options out there. I think we got stuck in, well, this is how you have to feel when you get a divorce, and this has
Mm-hmm.
how you should feel. And people are saying, oh, I don't have to show up that way. I can um heal myself, take the time to heal through that trauma. It is traumatic, and all of those things, and mourn the relationship you thought you'd have, and then figure out ways to show up in a way that works. So I think there's just more people talking about it.
Yeah, I think, and from what I've seen, divorce is more accessible now. Like we can say, marriages are falling apart, or we can say people are taking ownership over their choices and over their life, and they're recognizing what's healthy and what's not.
Yes.
And when those people who are choosing their health and their highest good over like comfort and social conventions and things, I would think those people would be much more likely to then be healthy enough to then choose into co-parenting and
Yes.
into that relationship because they value health and they value love
Yeah.
and all of those beautiful things that then they get to keep
Yeah.
because they've healed that deeper part of themselves that might otherwise make it so that it's really unsafe for them to be in those spaces.
100%. So well said. I think that's so true. Is there is divorce that's happening because it's better for the mental health of everybody involved. And I think we still get hung up on this. Well, it's not what's best for the kids. I'm like, no, it is what's best for the kids, because then the kids see that their mental health is important and
Mm-hmm.
valued, and they should be able to do what they need to show up for that mental health. Not that you're, not living up to obligations or whatever, like, but you still do what's important for your mental health. And I think it's a message that, it's a bummer it's coming out in divorce, but it's still good. It's still
Mm-hmm.
important.
So in closing, I would love to hear some of the blessings of your chosen life because we hear all the time the negatives about getting divorced and having to co-parent and how hard that is, but you have built, especially for your daughter, a life full of love, all these different textures of love, these different versions. You're creating things from scratch that are not portrayed in media and we don't talk about. They're not in books, at least very much right now. Maybe you should be writing a book. Write a book, please write a book. But you're giving her all these beautiful experiences that she gets to grow up with and normalize. And like, how many blessings is in that alone? But do you have a list of the beautiful things that you actually get because you have chosen this life?
Yeah. And one of the things I do on a daily basis is write a list of gratitudes. And so often the gratitude I feel that comes up are, Penny being able to go to her dad's house, and the peace I feel when she goes to her dad's house. Like, those moments are huge for a co-parent, of knowing that I can relax when my daughter is at her other home. Um, and like you said, the different textures of love. I love how you said that. It's invited so many different types of love into my life that I never would have experienced or opened myself up to had I not been here. And it's truly been one of the greatest gifts of my life. And it's so nuts when I say that out loud. I still am like, what are you saying? But I genuinely feel that this has given me ways to love people that I never thought I could. And it's given me ways to love myself that I didn't know I would. And that's amazing, which I feel like the more we love ourselves, the more we understand ourselves, the more we get to love other people and to see them in a different way, and to realize that they're doing the things that bring them light and joy. And that's awesome. Um, and honestly, one of the other things that I just always feel overcome with, of like moments of holy crap, this is my life, is seeing my husband and my ex-husband together. It's like
That's a mind F right there.
yeah, the way they joke with each other and mess with each other, and also the ways that they tease me, because they both know me really well.
I bet they gang up on you a little bit. I
Oh
think
yeah,
that might be happening.
they totally do. And it's in those moments that I am just so grateful and overcome with joy and peace of knowing that we did something right. It has not been perfect and it has not been easy, but holy crap, it makes me so happy. We have a pool in our backyard, and Steve will come over in the summer and hang out by the pool with us. Um, and those are some of my favorite moments of just being there with Steve, and it feels like my family is complete. And yeah, it's it's just that love that I've been given. And then the love that I get to feel for other people who are in my situation or who are in Steve's situation or who are in co-parenting situations, that I then get to go and be a support person for them and help them feel seen. If it's nothing more than helping them feel seen and know they're not alone in this, and that they're they can be okay down the road. Not the toxic positivity type of stuff, but just that there is a hope. And I think we all need that hope. So those are some of the things that I feel grateful for, and that I have been given in all of this.
Thank you so much. It is super hopeful and beautiful. And I love, like, it's like full circle. Like, you get to be surrounded by these people that know you so much and love you. And you get to have lighthearted moments
Yeah.
with your spouse and your ex-husband at the
Yeah.
same time. Like, that is the coolest thing ever.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you go listen to our podcast, you will hear that, like, start with episode 1. We tell our story all the way through up until what we're going through today. And it really is that lighthearted mixed in with the heavy and the real. And I think that's a way to give people to hope that you can feel both these things. You can carry. It's hard, and I never want to negate any of that, or say, oh, you'll be fine, because it is hard. But then also, I want you to find those moments of joy in those moments of clarity, those moments of peace, and all those things, like, they can coexist. So that's what we're trying to help
I
people
love
see and
it.
feel.
It's not black and white. It's not even gray. It's a
No.
beautiful rainbow. And you have behind you, you have this beautiful rainbow of flowers, and they're all different colors. And like,
Yep.
there's so much more life to live than our scare, like when we're living in that fear part of our brain, than
Mm-hmm.
what we can even imagine. And I
Yep.
love that you are sharing that story and the blessings and the joy of the consequences of your choices,
Yeah.
and unforeseeable, but beautiful.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you so much, Jessica. If people would like to come and hear more from you, or work with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, so you can head to our podcast, Husband in Law. It's on all podcasting platforms. We are also very active on Instagram. And when I say we, it is mostly me. The guys have full-time jobs, and this is my thing that I do, with their support and love behind me. But we are on Instagram at Husband in Law as well. And then, yeah, there's links there that you can find information about my group coaching and the Boldology journal, the journals that I referenced in there, the guided journal. You can find those there as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jessica.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for listening today. This has been a really beautiful conversation with Jessica. I really appreciate her perspective and gratitude for this beautiful life that has unfolded in front of her, that she has worked to create, and how she has used her relationship with herself and her introspection and taking ownership over her values and her fears to then be able to create these new dimensions of love that none of us are taught how to do. None of us are taught how to love an ex-spouse or really co-parent. And I love that she is kind of on the frontier of talking about what this relationship can look like, what the possibilities are, and then what the blessings are of this unique situation. So thank you so much to Jessica. Thank you so much to all of the parents out there, to all of the co-parents out there, to everybody who is prioritizing their healing. I think this is what we can do for the next generation, whether or not we have children, is to heal our deep wounds and be able to show up in the world in the way of our choosing. And I'm so grateful to have the opportunity on this podcast to interact with these amazing people and learn from them, because I learn so much. So thank you so much for coming here and learning with me today. If you would like to listen to any of the other episodes, We're everywhere podcasts are. And you can also find us online at womenofambitionpodcast.com. And I'm also on Instagram if you want to hang out there. That is a much more casual space that I hang out at, and we can all chat about things there. So hope to see you there.